Hello everyone, my name is Mike the Bird. I am a free content creator and Twitch streamer that does game dev, and I do everything myself. If you are coming from the community challenge from Spectrum Production, then that's because you want to see a bit more advanced stuff than what you saw during the challenge. During the challenge we used FontStruct, but here we're gonna do a bit more advanced techniques, so get prepared, we're in for an adventure. But yeah, as I said, I am a Twitch streamer and content creator that does game dev, and when I say I do everything myself, I really mean everything myself. I do the models, I do the animations, I do the music, I do the sprites, I do everything, even down to the font in some cases. And this is what the whole topic today will be. It will be about how to make a font. So yeah, how to make a font with me, Mike the Bird. You're a cool bird at the studio. But yeah, before actually starting, you might have that question in your head actually, like, what the bird is a font anyway? Like, what does that even mean? Well, that simply means that just a massive set of illustrations that represents different characters in the alphabet. And for more technical users, that's the ASCII set of characters. And a font has different properties. For example, set the correct distance between each character. And I've set up some examples here. You can see like some fancy fonts there, and hey, you can even see the Avengers font over there. So, yeah, it's just, there's a lot of fonts online that you can just look. But now the question is, where can a font be used? You might be asking, like, why would I need a font? Well, actually, it is used a bit more often than you may think, because it can be used in literally any medium. It could be used in games, websites, movies, logos, posters, books, journals, keyboard keys, cardboard boxes, a meme on a coffee mug, and more. Like, I've compiled a couple of examples here. Like, I've got my logo for, did you know I make my passion project called Project Flight, which is a bird racing game where you can just build your own birds. Anyway, self-promo later. Logos. I've got a coffee mug with some text, some cozy text with a cozy font, because why not? I've got a terminal over there, lines of code, uses also fonts to be able to read. It needs a specific type of font to be able to work. Then I've got a website there, which also has a font on it. I've got a meme where, don't forget to hydrate your baguettes, because else you're going to be in trouble. Hydrate them every single day, please. And then a keyboard, because each letter on your keyboard, it has a font associated to it to make it consistent and throughout the entire keyboard. So yeah, literally anywhere a font can be used. So now you might be interested into making one. So yeah, like, ways to make fonts. Like, how do you get started? There's a couple ways to get started. There's two ways actually compiled. There's an easy way, and then there's a hard but fully customizable way. Let's start with the easy ways first, which is online creation tools. Because online, there's like loads of online font creators that you can just use, and there you can have fonts easily without downloading anything. And I've compiled 3 softwares here, which I've tested all of them. They work pretty fine, and they're pretty good. So I've got FontStruct, FontArc, and Glyphs. And yeah, they're all simple to use. First off, FontStruct, by far the simplest of the bunch. If you want to get started and you don't want to like have like complex designs and everything, go FontStruct, because it works with shapes and a grid system. So you select from a list of shapes and you can place them in a grid and make each layer like that. Super simple. And it's fully 100% free to use. So yeah, no worries for paywalls or anything. It's going to be fully free. But it might be a little limiting because of course it's just, well, shapes. So you don't have like drawing capabilities or anything. So yeah, it's a bit of a compromise, but you can still make complex fonts with it. There's a whole library of user content, user-made fonts made with FontStruct. They've got a library on their website, and dear lord, they've got like so much complex fonts as well. So it's worth a check. Then we got FontArc, which has a lot more advanced tools available, and way more complex fonts are possible, because now it works with kind of a grid system still, but it works with points and you link points with lines. So it has some kind of vector drawing capability, but you're still using a grid system. So it's still very simple to use. Still a bit more complex for advanced users, but not as complex as you having to make all your guides and all your lines and everything. So pretty good. Though it has a limited browser capability. So it works with 3 browsers right now. It works with Chrome, Safari, and Vivaldi. What the bird is Vivaldi anyway? Anyway, only 3 browsers, so it's a bit limited. Still for more advanced users, as I said. And though I've read in the future you might actually need to pay to download your custom fonts. So a bit of point remove for me there. But if you don't mind that tiny paywall, it can still be a good option. And then you've got Glypher. If you don't want that paywall, go Glypher. Because it still retains the vector drawing capability, but this time it's like fully vector. It's not just like a grid system with points to line up. It's fully vector, 100% free to use, and it has no sign up. You just go on the website, you press start, bang, you're on the editor. No sign up like Fontstruct or FontArc. It's just simple. Though, since it's still like proper vector drawings, it's still a little bit for the advanced user side, so keep that in mind. So in summary, if you want to keep it easy, Fontstruct is the way to go. If you want to go full vector, but still browser, then go Glypher. If you don't mind a paywall and want to have a bit of both, having grid and also vector, then use FontArc. So those are my 3 choices. But then, the hard but fully customizable way, which is the way you've been, you wanted to see from this video by clicking on it, which is using your favorite vector drawing software, could be Illustrator, Affinity Designer, Inkscape, etc., and a dedicated font software like FontForge, FontLab, and Bird Font. I swear this is not scripted, this is actually a software that exists. But a combination of both would let you freely make any kind of font you can imagine. So, yay! And that is the way we're going for. But now you may be asking, with all that effort you need, why not just use Comic Sans or some font that you can find on like the font or something? Well, there's a couple of reasons why you'd consider making a custom font. So one of them is that each font have, like music, different licenses. Like you've got commercial, non-commercial, free and paid, non-attribution. You've got so many licenses that you have to worry, just like music. So, yeah, it can be confusing if you don't know what you're looking for. So then if you think, I don't want to bother, I'm just going to go on Google Font and get a free font there. It's quick, but it's going to be easily recognizable online because of the potential massive usage in other people's projects because, well, they're free and anyone can download it. So that font's going to be reused anywhere. That's the little problem with free fonts. So then you can decide to go the paid route, but that comes with a paywall, which is sometimes absolutely massive for one single project. Don't ask me why sometimes you charge out of, but that's how it is. But to be fair, a paid font will never be used as much as a free one, because people prefer the free stuff usually, which will still make your product look more unique, but never as much as a fully custom font. By making a custom font, you will be a proud owner of something that is completely unique of your own imagination. It will still take a lot of effort, but to custom fit a project and just have a font you can just use anywhere and commercially and as much as you want, and maybe even sell the font later, this is definitely the best option. Yay! But before diving in, before being super excited all about that, I want to explain a bit of the terms I'm going to be saying during the whole presentation, because you're going to have a lot of things, but you might not understand them and you might not know them, because those are like font specific. So I built the font dictionary, which is a little dictionary I've compiled for myself and for you to actually refer to depending on the term I say and to understand what that means. Let's, for example, say glyph. The definition of a glyph will be that it's pretty much just the illustration of a single character. Example. Example here. This is the glyph for the letter A in the Arial family. We're just talking about the drawing here. The glyph is the drawing itself. And that drawing represents a character that you set in the font. So for example, that glyph represents the character A in the font. Pretty simple. Then you got family, which you might have heard before. But in more definition term, it's a group of fonts using the exact same typographic look, but containing different variants, we call. And those variants can be like, it's pretty much just the same font, but with a slightly different look. A single family can contain the regular font, a bold variant, a thin variant, an italic variant, etc. For example, here's the bench script family, where you've got the regular font, which is just the regular version. Then you've got the bold, which is a bit thicker, bolder. Then you've got the thin variant, which is a bit thinner. And you've got the italic, which is slanted on the side. And all of those are part of the bench script family. We call it bench script regular, bench script bold, bench script thin, bench script italic as the variants, but then everything is into the bench script family. It's like a family name, you know, when you got your family name with your family, it's always the same with like your dad and you, stuff like that. Same here, they've got the same name, but different looks. Serif. Now this is something that it's gonna affect how you want to make your font. You might have noticed on some characters, some lines like at the edges, like at the bottom of the legs or stuff like that, like here. Those red lines here, those are the serifs. It's just like little hooks at the bottom of top of like edges of characters. And you might have actually seen, like on Google Font, if you go into filters, you might have seen a filter called sans serif, which pretty much means you want fonts that don't have them. For example, over there, you've got the Arial font, and you can notice that those red lines that I'm showing on the Times New Roman font here are not there. That's because it's sans serif, so it has no serifs whatsoever, versus this one, which is a serif font. Oh yeah, serifs and sans serif. Pretty useful to know. Then you got thickness and weight. We saw that earlier with bold and thin, but that's pretty much the thickness of your characters. And yeah, here's a little example with the Poppins family, where you've got thin, extra light, light, medium, semi-bold, bold, and extra bold, and also black. And you can see it goes from the thinnest to the thickest. And those are all the different weights that family offers. And there's actually a little difference between thickness and weight. It's pretty much the same thing, but thickness represents the actual like size of the character versus weight, which is what we call the variance. So we call like the variant with the weight extra bold or the variant with the weight medium versus thickness, which is like the slider you can adjust in like filters and everything. But also it's something called weight, so you can mix and match both. But usually that's at least how I called it. Then you got slant and italic. Pretty much the same as bold, where one is the like the name of the actual thing, and italic is the name of the variant. So some fonts you might notice will be a little crooked on the side. For example, here you got over there, it's a bit crooked on the side. That's called italic, but that's the name of the variant. What the name of the actual thing is, it's called slant. So slant just means your character is like tilted on the side to the right. And when it's the regular version, like the actual default font is crooked, it just have a slant. If it's a variant, that's italic. It's the name of the variant. And I've got the example here. Regular of the Arial is, well, straight, and then italic is slanted on the side. So let's just call it italic for now, because that's how people usually call it. Baseline. Now that is something that you will want to know when making your font, because every single character of a font kind of rests on an invisible line. For example here, bird up. there, you've got some kind of invisible line where all of your characters are standing on. Like, you can see like clearly the bottom of the B, I, R, D, U, and P, they all rest on that baseline. And yeah, it's pretty much just that invisible line, and all characters are aligned somehow on it. But it's not just the baseline, there's also other lines that the characters are aligned to. And there are a total of 4 lines. There's the baseline, but there's also the mean line, the cap line, and the descender line. So the mean line is where the top of lowercase characters are gonna end up. So you can see the U, P, the I, and the R, they end up on that mean line. Then you've got the cap line, which is where the capital letters are gonna end up at. So you can see the capital B ends up there. But you can also see that the stem of the D also stretches up to the cap line. So they all, even that aligns to some kind of line. And then the descender line, some characters will go underneath the baseline, like G, J, P, Q, stuff like that. And those lines will align on the descender line. Like the P here, the bottom stem aligns on that line. So those, very important to know when you're actually making your font. Because else your font is not going to look super equal unless that's the look you're going for. But usually a font have like those lines to align properly. So yeah, those lines are very important. Letter spacing is the spacing between the characters globally. Some fonts have a relative spacing where all the space looks the same, like the space between B, I, and R, they all look the same even though the font, the width of each character is different, but the space looks the same. And some others have a fixed distance between each glyph, whatever the width is. So for example, in a terminal, you will see each character like aligned like horizontally, of course, but also you can align them vertically because they all have the same width and they all have the same spacing, which is also called monospace. And that is very useful for command lines, code editors. Usually that's where you'd find monospace, but you've got also other applications where you can use monospace. Then you finally have kerning, which is kind of the same as letter spacing, but instead of acting on every single character, it acts up on only a pair of characters. So in this case, I am acting up on the kerning of I and R. Because some characters, like, you might put I and J, which will look fine because the J will go underneath the I perfectly fine. But then you would put maybe Q and J, and the stem of the Q will overlap the line of the J. So in that case, you'd put a kerning on that pair to actually space them out just a tiny bit on that specific set of letters. So that's the way to actually make your font look a bit more readable in loads of cases. Like, it's gonna take a lot of time, loads of trial and error with loads of your characters, see what works, what does not work, what you need to put kerning, what you do not need to put kerning, but that's how it's done. It's gonna take a lot of time, believe me, but it's gonna be worth it at the end. And then one final definition I want to put in there is variable fonts, because that's kind of the future of fonts. I'm pretty feeling like it's going to be the future. You can imagine like an entire family of font files, because you've got like regular, bold, all of those are like separate files. Take all of them, smack them in an hydraulic press, and you have a variable font. Because in a nutshell, it's pretty much all of a single family with all the weight and all the styles into a single file. And what's fun with them, you have 2 parameters to actually adjust the width and also the thickness of the characters. And with that, you can just do like dynamic stuff, you can animate it, you can actually do quite wacky stuff with variable fonts, just like you can see here. Like, what is happening here? It's going crazy. Those types of fonts you usually find on websites because they're super small in comparison and they're very versatile. As you can see, you can animate them, you can shape them however you want. Super useful, but it can be useful in other places too. I think Illustrator supports it, if I remember correctly. Other softwares support it, I'm pretty sure too. So just gotta go and find which one support it. But usually it's on websites. So if you do a website, consider a variable font. Though I've never made one, and that's not what we're gonna make tonight because holy crap, that's gonna take a while. But still, very interesting to know, and I'm definitely gonna look it up in the future because that's very interesting. Anyway, now that you know all the terminologies that we're gonna need, time to actually make the font. So, the first step will be to actually figure out what would work best for your project. So, in that case, there's a couple of questions you should probably ask yourself. First off, what's the theme of your project? Is it sci-fi? Is it horror? Is it fantasy? Is it playful? Is it something else? Why that questions? That's because a font will work best if it matches the look of the targeted content. For example, Star Wars logo. It looks very space, it looks very futuristic, and you've also got like horror like books or horror titles with like a very bloody font, or you've got some kind of very fantasy font which be like very like written. Like there's all kinds of different styles for all kinds of different themes. So look up which one you're gonna use it for and inspire yourself from that. Second question would be, what medium would the product use? Is it going to be a movie? Is it going to be a web page? Is it going to be a book? Is it going to be a game? Because a font with serifs works best for written mediums, like printed, while sans serif works best with digital content, so for screens. There are still small exceptions with that, but usually that's the way it goes. But that was usually in the old days. Why? Because at the time, the screens were so low resolution that a font with serif, the pixels on the screen would not actually be able to very well display all those. So it would just look like a blurry mess. So that's why they made sans serif the norm for screens. But these days, with higher resolution screens, it's not so much of an issue if you do serif or not. So it's much of a matter of preference these days. But still, it's a good thing to consider depending on if you go printed or not, because printed it's usually with serif. Third, where would that font be seen? Is it going to be a logo? Is it going to be a subtitle? Is it going to be a long paragraph of text? That's a good question to ask, because when written small or at low resolutions, some types of fonts are going to be better seen than others. Like this font here can be seen quite well at lower res, but a font like maybe the Star Wars logo or my font even on long paragraphs of small text, it's gonna be a nightmare. So yeah, yeah, you have to know where you're gonna use that font. So is it small? Is it big? Is it long? Is it short? Because yeah, shorter ones are usually for logos and more like very fancy font for those. So yeah, if you go fancy, it's going to be mostly for a logo or a short head title. If you're going for small and a very simple font that can be easily read, you're going for like a paragraph. That's what I would say. Fourth question, are you thinking of using that font in other projects? So that can be interesting because some fonts you make like specifically for something, like again for the Star Wars logo, like it's the Star Wars logo. I don't think anywhere else that font is really used. And other logos, usually logos, it's like a very unique font, and that's just used for that logo. And then you've got more reused fonts like Arial or that font here, where it's important to be able to read it like any place, anytime. So mind where you're gonna use that font in other projects if you need. And fifth, not necessarily a question, but feel free to find some inspiration online. Fonts that allow you to download them can be tested in the target project. So just download one from Google Font or the font, see if it works. If it fits your needs, then it's a good inspiration. Take it and inspire yourself from that font. Really good to do that. Always like music, and like other projects, it's good to have inspiration. Once you are done with those questions and you know what to do, step 2 will be to do test sketches. So it's now time to actually start drawing, but let's not go ahead of ourselves and do every single 80 plus characters you're gonna need. First, take a paper and a pen or your graphic tablet and start drawing some test sketches by hand. You should focus right now on characters called the control characters. And there's a couple ones that people mention online, and I've compiled a couple here. And those are really just to know and feel a bit better how your font is going to look in multiple situations. And here I've compiled, as I said, multiple characters that I found online. Those are all good for control characters, and I really recommend the O because it has a good round base that can be morphed into a lot of things. So go for the O every time you sketch, and do other ones as well. And again, as I said, the baselines are going to be very important, so get some lines going and start drawing your font following those baselines and following those guides I mentioned, like ending your lowercase at the mean line and the baseline and stuff like that. So be mindful of that. And when you do those control characters, those control characters are not random. That's because you can actually morph them into other characters. Like, for example, the P can actually be morphed into a Q, a D, a B, and then a D. Because they all look very similar, it just flipped or rotated. And then you've also got N, which can be morphed into an H or an R by either adding a stem or removing one stem. Yep, that's very easy. Like, you can just morph characters into other characters, and then using those morph characters, you can also make other characters from that. So, super useful to have those test sketches. Like, your selection is actually going to depend on your workflow and also depending on the style you're going for. And of course, you don't need to do every single glyph before declaring, it's time to make the real deal. And now, we're actually going to start making our font. So let's make all the glyphs digitally. So once I have some test sketches, it's time to make the real thing. Everything will be done digitally to be able to make the font file, which is going to be TTF in our case. And this is where it's going to deviate from the challenge, where here at that step I mentioned where we used font struct. In this advanced video, we're going to use Illustrator from Adobe to draw, and then FontForge, which is free downloadable, to make the font file. The basic sets are pretty much the same as the challenge. So to make a basic set of characters, you're going to need between 80 and 94 characters. And I've compiled them in here. So you've got the basic set of 94 characters that I found. And I compiled also my own opinions in there, what I should put, what not. With those characters, you can do most things. So I'd recommend going for that route. But if you don't have time really to do all 94, you can also try and go for the 80 characters, which I call the bare minimum, which removes a little bit of characters from the list. Like, for example, over there, the square brackets and the curly brackets, gone, because those are not super used often in regular typing. Those are mostly used for like code and things like that. So I could remove them. But yeah, choose the 94 or the 80 characters. You can pause the video and see which characters you're going to need and decide for yourself. So once you have that and you know what you're going to do, it's time to open up Illustrator. Or any other software that can export SVG. As long as you can export SVG, you should be good. In our case here, Illustrator will work. And of course, if you're using a different software than I am using right here, the feature set I'm going to use here might be different than other software. Like, for example, I'm pretty sure not all software have artboards, not all software have guides, even though that would be a crime if they didn't have guides for like illustrations. But not all software is going to have the same feature set, so you can try to morph it for your own software and see what you can do with it, but the principle is going to stay the same. So the step 1, with Illustrator opened, is going to be to go to new file and be sure that in artboards you put how many characters you want to create. So if you selected the 80 characters, do 80 artboards. If you selected 94 characters, then do 94 characters. If you decide to go crazy and also go the Arabic route or do some icons, then do more artboards even. So do that. The width and height, set it to 350 pixels because with FontForge, that's what is preferred. I've tested it and it's pretty much spot on. And then once that's done, you can press create. But of course, depending on how many artboards you decide to do, you're gonna end up with something like this. Yeah, don't panic, don't panic. It will make real sense soon. It will make real sense soon. So let's first organize things. So in window artboard at the top, in the little bar at the top, you're gonna want to open that and it's gonna open up the artboards tab. And there you'll want to rename each of the artboards to one of the characters that you'll make, and all need to be unique. So for example, you have one name like upper A, one name upper B, one name exclamation, etc. I put exclamation mark here, but you should put actually letters. That's a little mistake in my PowerPoint. You should put letters instead, as I did in the example image. You can see I put exclamation, question, stuff like that. You want to keep letters because that's what your file names are going to be when you're going to export. And if you put symbols, it's going to fail to export. And same here, if you only do like capital A or and also lowercase a in the names, that's not going to work either because they're going to merge together, which is not what you want. So that's why you do upper A and then lower A, or whatever other name you can think of. But that's how I would name the artboards. You've got a load to rename, but once that's done, you don't have to think about it anymore. And to make your job easier to rename, I recommend trying to press Shift O or clicking the artboard tool, which is right there, right above the magnifier. And what that will do is, I don't know if you see the little rectangles at the top left of each artboard, that's going to display the name of those artboards. So when you rename one, it's going to update automatically. Handy. Very handy. I use it all the time. But now to create the guides. And those guides are going to be your baseline, mean line, cap line, and descender line. So all the lines I keep talking about and you're going to keep hearing. You make those 4 lines. You make a baseline, you make a mean line, a cap line, a descender line with... using the ruler, you drag, and then it creates the lines. And that's how you're going to create your reference lines. And you can also put one at the top of the artboard and one at the bottom of the artboard to align it when we're going to copy paste them. So make those lines, adjust them so that they fit in the style of how you did them on your sketches. And then you want to select all of them. Do first it on the first row. Then select them with box select, copy and then paste it and scroll it down until it aligns with the second artboard underneath the exact same way. And copy paste, do the same, copy paste, do the same, copy paste, do the same until you reach the final row. So it's gonna take a bit of time and a bit of patience, but it's gonna work. And then another line I would add is one vertical, so not from the top ruler, but from the left ruler. You drag a line and you put it vertical at around like 50 pixels to the right of the first artboard. And that's going to be creating an intersection, which we're going to call the origin, because characters are being placed referring to an origin, so very important to have that set correctly. And yeah, that's going to be the origin. But actually align it properly on the other columns as well. You first want to align it to the complete left, so instead of aligning it like right there, you'd align it here instead on the edge of the artboard. And then you place another one on the second row same way, column same way, then the third column same way until you reach the final column, then select all of these and then slide them around 50 pixels. And that's how you do it. There's probably an easier way to do those using the guides menu, but I'm not very much an Illustrator user. I'm mostly using something called Affinity Designer, which I mentioned earlier, but there's probably an easier way, but for now that's my method, which is consistent. And then for safety, just to be sure that you don't mess it up later, because you can actually move those lines by accident, take the layer that all the guides went into and lock it. That way you won't move those guides by accident, which is very useful. And then the final preparation step will be to create 1 layer per artboard. So if you have 94 artboards, you'll need 94 layers. Taking +1 because there's also 1 layer automatically put what all the guys went into. You can log that one and create 94 extra artboards. Yeah, those are where you're gonna draw your letters and everything. Like, do 1 per letter. That's why 94 artboards, 94 letters, 94 layers. Yeah, you get the point. You want to name all those layers the same way you named the artboards. Not necessary, because that does not affect the file name, but just for your convenience, it's better to do it. And you'll draw each glyph under the respective layer. And with that, the document is finally complete. It took a bit of time, but it's done. And what's fun about that is that you can then save it as a template if you want to use it in future font projects. So win-win. But now, time for the longest step. Finally making the glyphs. Oh dear. Oh god. On each layer, you want to draw the corresponding glyph using your sketches as a base. So be sure that they align together using the reference guides that you made earlier. And don't forget to save often, because especially if you have 94 characters or more, if you work on it and then it crashes in the middle, you lost everything. So be sure to save. And yeah, that's gonna be the longest step, so I think it's good to say that 1 eternity later, you're gonna end up with all characters like this. So after quite some time, you're gonna have all your characters. It's the longest step, and the next one just should be pretty much quicker. And as you can see here, I've got all my letters, and I've actually got even the document in my saved somewhere, if I can even find my mouse somewhere. Where's my mouse? So there it is. It's quite the beast, but you can see all the layers here, which are all named very accordingly. I know my arms are broken. That's because I'm using my mouse. Okay, that's better. But all the layers, you've got all the letters, which you can see aligned on my baseline, my mean line, my cap line, and then the sender line. If I can find one letter that has one, there it is, the sender line here. So you want to align them pretty much this way on your characters, and then the artboards are named the exact same way as the layers. And yeah, it takes a bit of time to do, but once you have it, it's there, and really, really, really worth the time to actually do that. So then the next step, which is a bonus step, if you want some extra fun, you can have emote characters, because in the character set, you have what are called Unicode characters, which mostly when we talk about Unicode characters, we talk about like special, very, very special characters, specialized. For example, smiley face. There's a character like that. And what you can do, you can also customize this in FontForge. So in my case, in my product fight font, I put bird. And you can see it over there. That is the FontForge window, how it looks like. If I scroll down way a lot, there it was. There's the little bird icon linked to that same icon. So yeah, we're gonna see that later. Though I should say that by default, FontForge won't display all of those. It will only display the base characters and a bit more. You have to select the specific set of characters you want, which is like extended, and that's where you're gonna see those. But we're just gonna stay to the default, so it's not gonna display by default, but yeah. But yeah. if you want to do any of these, you want to create additional artboards. If you want to edit these, one per emote, it's pretty much simple. You don't really need the guides for that, but it's still good to have them. But yeah, one additional artboard per emote. Simple enough. And then step 4, once everything's done, it's time to export. Not the font, the glyphs. Just to make the difference here. But to export, there's still a couple more steps to do. And to be sure that all glyphs are aligned properly in FontForge, because for some reason, if you were to export like we have right now, with everything aligned on the glides and everything, it would be completely offset in FontForge. I don't know why, but what you have to do is take everything you have, take all the letters, all your punctuation, everything, and move them to be aligned with the bottom left edge of the artboards. So just like in the image right there. If not done now, it's gonna be hard to adjust in FontForge precisely. You can undo this operation after exporting the glyphs if you wanna keep it a bit more prettier, and also with the guides and everything. So yeah, you do that, and by doing that, there's also a chance that some glyphs will be underneath the artboard. So all you have to do is right-click the little glyph itself, transform, move, and then you move it on the y-axis 200 pixels up. So to do that, you have to do -200, and then you put 0 in X. That's how you'd fix it. And then we can adjust in FontForge later. Once that's done and everything seems ready to do, go to File, Export, Export for Screens, then select all artboards, select your export folder, then set the format to SVG, and SVG, J is like in French, SVG, and export artboards. And that's pretty much it. They're all exported. So you can check your export folder that you selected to see all the beautiful SVG files you created. So now we have the glyphs, all of them already. But now step 5 is to actually build the font itself. So now we're actually gonna go into FontForge. So it's a free and open source font editor that fits perfectly your needs, and you can freely be downloaded on fontforge.org. So yeah, if you don't have it, I'd recommend downloading it. If not, you have other options too. But that's what I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using FontForge. So when you open it up for the first time, you'll be greeted with an open window, open font window. And that's to open an existing project. But because we don't have an existing project, just click the new button and it's going to create a file. It's just going to create the font project. It's not actually going to create a save file. You have to save it later. Some extra step can be done, but I won't have time to explain them tonight, and also some things I don't know yet. So yeah, for now, what I'm going to provide here is going to be enough. Just enough to finish a font. So once you press the new button, you're going to end up with this bigger chaos. Don't worry, it looks daunting, but it's fine. Like, each glyph is represented by a little square in the big mess. And you only have, actually, if I go back once, like you have all this, but we're only gonna focus on like this little part here. Like, we don't need to focus on everything, just this part. Just to reassure you. So each square represents a glyph that you can draw something in, or import something in. And you can see which square means what by looking right above it. Right above it is the character that square is for. So for example, that one highlighted right there is for the letter A. And they're all empty by default. So to import a to import a glyph, you want to go to File, Import, or do, I think, Control-Shift-I. Select the SVG format in the little filter, else it's not gonna display your files. Select your glyph in the correct folder, and then press Import. And once that's done, you're gonna see the glyph appear in this square. It's gonna look a little offset from where it needs to be, but that's something we're gonna adjust later after importing everything else. And it should not be too hard. So repeat that step until all glyphs in the current set are imported. Some will not import here, like for example the double opening quotes, because that set of characters don't have that specific glyph. So we're just gonna use opening quotes instead. Or use closing quotes. That's the one you usually use. And also don't forget to save the font project often with file save, just like with Illustrator or your drawing software. So you don't want this to crash or your PC to crash or have a power outage and lose everything. So file save. And fun fact, the blue line at the top, like that highlights the name of the glyph, that means that this character is not saved. So when you press Ctrl S, it's gonna remove those purple lines and put them blank. But if a glyph is modified, it's gonna be highlighted purple. And you might notice some weird stuff happening, like what the heck? What is that little dot there on the closing square bracket, like on the top here? So there's still some problems, but we're gonna fix them as part of point number 3. So the first one is that all letters, no exceptions, are now seemingly under the baseline. And in my case, exactly 200 pixels under, which might be the default descender line, that's my guess. You can look at any glyph individually by double-clicking one. Just for info, you're gonna have this editor open. And since this is on all of them, except for the one you moved 200 pixels up previously, or whatever value you move them up, let's move all of them except those at the same time. So select the ones you want to move. So all the ones you didn't move yet, you didn't move extra up, and then right click, transform, and from there in the move section you want to set the X to 0 and then the Y to 200, or whichever value you saw in the glyph window where the descender line was. That's gonna fix those letters, and now you want to do the exact same for the ones you moved previously in Illustrator. So transform, move, and then move them -200 or the value you moved them up. And this should fix every single offset from the baseline, but there's still more fixing to do. So you might also have noticed, you know that one little dot I mentioned on the closing square bracket? Well, that's why. There's an intruder in some of the glyphs. Intruder alert. Help. And that is due because when we move the glyphs a little bit lower, some glyphs now overlap other artboards and exported with those artboards as well. So to fix it, you just go in those glyphs by double clicking them, then box select that extra letter, and then press delete. And that should take care of the problem. Just do that with just check every single glyph, see if any have that, and if you see that, you can just delete the top glyph. Perfectly fine. And actually, that could also be fixed in Illustrator if you put bigger margin between the artboards. If you were to go, when you create the project in advanced more settings, you'd have an option for margin next to artboard, where you can adjust the spacing of the artboards. That would have maybe fixed it, but I wanted to keep it simple without that, but I guess that caused issues with my font. But whatever, it's still a simple fix, but it can be remedied in Illustrator itself. And then you can feel free to go through each glyph and adjust their positioning individually, just to be sure that they're correctly aligned vertically and stuff like that. Yeah, it might get some time to get it right, but it's gonna be worth it, believe me. Step 4, it's time to adjust the letter spacing and the kerning. So to visualize that, go to metrics at the top and then new metric window. And this will make a new window appear, which is gonna be, well, the metric window. Ooh, I see a little text field there. Let's type something in. Oh. Yeah, that looks a little weird. Well, it's time to adjust that spacing, I guess. So yeah, the font currently works as monospace because it's still using the default spacing and the default 100,000 unit glyph width on every single character. And it's obviously way too wide here. You can change the width of a character either by going through the metrics window. So at the bottom you can see rows and columns like a grid. One is name for the new character, and then the second row is width, And those are the width of the individual characters. So you can change it there, or you can select multiple characters in the main window, and then you right click, set width. And from there you can then type in the width and adjust the width of the character. And this will take some time again, but in the end it's gonna be worth it. Like, this looks much better than before. And yeah, feel free to experiment with the width of each glyph. That way, like, you know, you can have some very cool effects if you place some width somewhere and stuff like that. Anyway, there are so many knobs and tweaks you can do, like kerning, left and right bearing, and many more. But I won't have the time to go through all of it, unfortunately, because you know there's not a lot of time right now in one video to do all of that. And also there's still some windows I have trouble with, like the kerning window. I don't fully understand it in FontForge, but if you want to know more, feel free to also check out the documentation on FontForge as well. You can just look up FontForge documentation on Google, and you should pop into the official documentation, which is also linked here, fontforge.org/en-us/documentation. That is the official documentation. So once that's done, like, let's just move on. Like, after adjusting all those letters, let's move on to preparing the font metadata, aka the details in the font's data telling how to be recognized. So to prepare that, you go to Element, Font Info. And this will open up, well, this window, where this is where all the data that the font has will be entered. And this is what software should recognize and use a font. So it's gonna read the name, it's gonna read the info, it's gonna read out the kerning info, it's gonna read everything in there. There's a lot of tabs, but the main settings we're gonna touch, and that are the main ones you should really touch for like beginners, is in PS names. So let's go through them one by one. So font name is the name of your font for the computer. So what is registered in the software, like Arial-regular, Arial-bold, etc. This field should not have spaces, so you use dashes instead of spaces. You can put capital letters, but no spaces, so do dashes. You can technically put spaces, but the standard is to have dashes instead. Family name is the name of the family of the font. If you have different variants like italic and bold, the font name field will be unique for each. So like Arial, bold, Arial, italic. But the family name will be the exact same. Like, you've got Arial regular, Arial bold, and Arial italic as the font name, but the font family will be just Arial. Simple as that. Name for humans. It's pretty much the name, but written for humans and birds, apparently. It's the exact same as font name, but you can use spaces. And this is what is going to be displayed in your font software. In any software, actually, when selecting a font. So, better make it pretty. Then the weight is the name of the weight type of the font. So is it regular / plain? Is it bold? Is it black? Is it thin? Etc. Then you got the version, because font creators can update their font too. So if you update your font in the future, you can use this field to change the version of the font. So it is usually formatted like major.minor, where major is the number representing updates for like massive changes, like a complete redesign. Take a look at, for example, EXO and EXO 2. It's the same font, the same family, but two completely different designs. And the minor version represents smaller changes, like small kerning improvements and spacing improvements, stuff like that. You know, just smaller changes, like game updates. You've got your minor updates and you've got your major updates. Same here. And then finally, you've got copyright. Because, as mentioned earlier, your font, you can sell it online. And people can use it online. So having your name in the copyright field would be important, because that's what the font, like, you're gonna see the copyright for the font somewhere, pretty sure. So you want to put copyright, C 20XX, whatever year, and then your name or company or brand name. Because yeah, stay true to your rights. You stay true to your rights. It's your creation. You have your rights on it. Like, you created it. Stand to your rights. So now, it is time for the moment we've been waiting for. Exporting the font. It's time to actually export the font and use it in everywhere. And we're gonna export it as TTF. There are many more settings we could touch, as I said, but I don't have time tonight, and my knowledge is still a little bit limited, because I'm more in a game dev that does a bit of everything, so I don't know everything of everything, if that even made sense. But if you want more info, as I said, feel free to check out the documentation or tutorials online. Other tutorials, because take other references too, that's also good. And to see how these work. So there's our documentation again. Feel free to use it. And it's gonna be linked in the description too. So to export it, go to File and then Generate Fonts. That's how the export is named in FontForge. And you want to navigate in that window that opens to your export folder, set the name of the file, and also don't forget to add TTF at the end, .ttf, because for some reason, if you don't do that, it's gonna export as some random file. So add .ttf at the end. Set the type to true type from the drop down right there, and then generate. You might have some warnings, though, where you're gonna say, hey, you're missing some connections or some errors, you should review those errors. You can ignore them right now. It's not really gonna affect the way, because you're still gonna be able to use the font, but it's a good thing to check them and try to fix those, because they could cause issues in other software. But for now, it's still gonna work nonetheless. So you can ignore them, just press generate, ignore the errors, and you should be good. So once it's generated, you will end up with a .ttf file with your font fully compiled and ready to use, just like here. Like, this is the font, it's ready to use. That's exactly what I've shown earlier. That's the exact same file I've made. That's the exact same FontForge project I've made and exported the exact same way I've shown. There's no more modifications. It's the exact same thing, and that's how it looks. It's really good. Like, you can make a lot with this method. It installs just like any other font you would download and install off the internet, because it's TTF. Every font you download is TTF or OTF. So you just double click, press install, there you go, you can use your font. Very simple. And then a future step, which is a bit of a bonus, is updating the font later. So to actually update the font, sometimes font creators will update the font, as I said. And to do that, you just reopen that font project and you can just continue modifying the font. And when exporting a new version, don't forget to actually change the version number in the PS names of the font info window. And with that, there you go. That's how you make a font the hard but fully customizable way. So, thank you for listening. And as a little bonus, if you want to know more about me, I've got my social media here. I stream on Twitch. Fair, come on, get some head pats.
Good job, good job,
Good job.
Stay away from me.
What the? I don't make things that suck. I make good. There goes my hips.
Whoa.
But do you boost?
Oh no.
Uh-oh.
Well, I guess you boost means that.
Oh no.
The 4-hour timer is not a New Year's timer, it's actually a death timer.
Can I get your stream when you die?
I've got a Twitter, which is also Mike the Bird. I've got a YouTube channel, which is the channel you're watching right now, so feel free to subscribe, watch my videos, watch my stream replays and everything. They are really fun to watch. Check out my itch.io and also my Game Jolt, because that's where I upload my games. So if you want to play my games, feel free to go there and try them out. So yeah, that's gonna be it for the advanced version of the community challenge for the fonts. And yeah, hopefully you had fun. Hopefully you make awesome fonts. I want to see them in the comments. And let me know what you think of this whole panel, because I'm really happy with how everything turned out. So, hopefully you enjoyed it, and I will see you soon, hopefully on my own content, and at Spectrum as well. So, see ya peeps!